Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us here for an information session focused on water rates, upcoming water projects, and sustainable service delivery for the Chapman water system and the water systems of Langdale, Cove Quay, Egmont, and Eastbourne. My name is Aidan Buckley, and I work as the Manager of Communications and Engagement with the Sunshine Coast Regional District. I want to start by acknowledging that the Sunshine Coast Regional District is located on the land of the Sechelt and Squamish First Nations. So this evening we have a panel. We got Tina Pro and Remco Rosenboom, who I'll introduce properly in a moment. We got some great information about water service in the region, and we've also got plenty of time for questions. This session is also on YouTube, so I'd ask that you please share this with maybe any neighbours or friends or family members who've not been able to make it to the live session here this evening. It'll be available on the STRD YouTube site as soon as the meeting is done. There's three ways you can ask a question here today. At the bottom of your screen there, you're going to see a raise hand icon. You can click that and we'll promote you into the meeting and you can ask a question. And there's also the Q&A function at the bottom where you can ask a question. You can also put something in the chat. If you'd like, I'd ask that you try and use the Q&A function as much as possible. Just helps us keep track of questions. So to our panel, we got Tina Pro, who's our Chief Financial Officer, with us this evening, and also Remco Rosenboom, General Manager of Infrastructure Services too. And shortly, Remco will start screen sharing the presentation, which both Tina and Remco will provide. And we're also joined by a number of our SCRD directors on the session, and they may add to information being provided by Remco and Tina as the session continues. For those of you who were just on the session with us for North Pender and South Pender water services, thanks for sticking with us. And with that, I'll pass it over to Remco. So feel free to screen share there, Remco, when you're ready.
Thank you, Aidan. I will do the screen sharing. Okay, there we go. So, as Aidan indicated, I have some slides prepared, and I will go through them together with Tina. We'll talk about how we deliver services, how they're being funded, there are user fees involved and frontage fees, and we try to delineate what the difference is between user fees and frontage fees. What are they? How are they being collected? What are they being used for? How do the reserves work? Because we do have reserves, and I'll provide a little bit more detail about it later. We will give an indication of what's the breakdown of the water budget for this year. How big is it? Where was it spent on? Some of the challenges we're seeing with our capital projects, a breakdown of some of the capital projects that we're working on, and we'll present the rates for next year that are currently being considered by the board, and I will highlight some of the projects that will be funded as a result of those rates being collected. And yeah, that's also the looking ahead to next year's budget. So the SRD has three water services. We have the regional water system service, which include the several water systems, including the Chapman, Langdale, Egmont, Cove Quay, Eastbourne, Granthams, and Soames water systems. All those water systems are being treated as one in terms of their financial management and their legal management. So only properties in that service area that have a benefit of the water being provided to them are paying into the system. That's the same for our North and South Pender system. So it's every dollar we collect for one of these three systems need to be spent within one of these three systems. So it's we cannot collect money for the regional water system and spend it in North Pender. That's legally not allowed. So this is the graphic depiction of those services. We have Cove Quay and Egmont in at the top. Then we have North and South Pender, which are two separate systems. As I just indicated, we have the large Chapman system. We have Langdale, Soames, Granthams, and Eastbourne on Keats Island. And Gibson's is highlighted in gray, and it has our own water system and not regulated by the SRD. So user fees, so we have two types of fees that we collect: user fees and parcel taxes. User fees are collected through our what we call our utility bill. The utility bill is sent out in April, and the user fees are funding the day-to-day operations of our water system. And any remaining funds at the end of the year are going into our reserve fund, our saving account, and that's being used to offset future future potential deficits or projects that are being funded out of operating reserves instead of every project is new user fees are being collected. So here's some examples of things that have been funded from user fees. It's one of the pictures here is the siphon system at Edwards that wasn't used heavily used this summer. The Chapman Creek treatment plant and some of the instrumentation inside the treatment plant itself. On the right side of the slide is the parcel tax, which is used to fund large capital projects like water main replacement, construction of new pumps, the drilling of new wells, water expansion, water supply expansion projects, etc., etc. Large infrastructure projects, and those are collected through property taxes that you will see on your doormat. If you live in the electoral areas, you get it from the province. And if you live in the district of Seychelles, you get it from the district of Seychelles. So both the province and district of Seychelles are collecting parcel taxes on our behalf and transferring those funds to the SRD. So we have, I think, Tina, I think this is better if you take this one.
Yeah, thanks, Remco. So the regional district has reserves for the regional water service. And as Remco was mentioning, those reserves can only be used for this particular service. So we can't transfer reserves from one to the next. So the same as how funds can't be transferred. So that makes funding the services of the regional district sustainably a challenge compared to other type of local government models, such as the province, federal government, or a municipality. That's just the regional district way of things. So how the funds are outlined are actually outlined within the bylaw itself. So for instance, we have an operating reserve for regional water, which is used to fund one-time operating projects. And the purpose of that is really to balance out the fees on a regular basis. Our capital reserves are exactly that. They're used to fund capital projects. So these particular bylaws are kept pretty generic to give us some flexibility with what we can use the funds for, but really it's to try to create some stability or to have other sources of funding when we are not successful with grants, or to fund, if we are successful with grants, a portion of unfunded amounts. So sometimes grants can be funded at 70% or 80%. Rarely do we actually get 100% funding for grants. So what those have been used for in the past is several particular operating projects. There are several dozen projects that have been approved through reserves over the last few years, one being the running of the Chester well. The other is capital reserves, so emergency water main fixes in Selma Park are some of the ways that those have been used in the past. So one of the challenges, if you go to the next slide, Remco, is for our reserves, and this is part of the reasons for some of the user rate increases for this year or parcel tax increases, is over the last 3 years, the regional district has used a significant amount of reserves to fund projects. So as an example, at the start of 2022, our operating reserves were approximately 3.8 million. At the end of 2022, our uncommitted operating reserve balance is somewhere in the neighborhood of just shy of 700,000. So that just shows you that very quickly, and based on the costs of things, we do need to make some repatriate some of those funds back into the operating reserve to build up those pots of funds. And so some of the things that we've used it for, and this is for planned projects, but also for unplanned projects. That's where you want some operating reserves or some contingencies. Rainy day fund is another way to put it. So, of course, one of the biggest things that we've had to do this year is to service a emergency drought response. And so that has been approved by the board in the amount of up to $550,000. And that amount, yes, we will repatriate some back from the province, but in the meantime, we need to be able to commit to funding those things until we know what we'll receive back from the province for that particular project. So in the rates reports, details quite extensively as to what the projects will be funded from what source. So another point at the bottom is that one of the challenges we have, because we have depleted our reserves, is that we have a lot of long-range projects that need to be done, both from an operational standpoint as well as a capital standpoint. So our capital reserves are somewhere in the neighborhood of about $5 million. Again, we've used several millions of dollars over the years. So again, some of this will be referenced when we talk about what the changes in rates are. So back to you, Remco, if you like.
Thank you, Tina. So I'm going to provide a slide with an overview of what actually our user fees are being paid for on a daily basis, what they're funding. Tina talked about the projects that are being funded, and this slide is more what is our staff doing on a daily basis, and that's being funded out of user fees. It's of course staffing, the actual treatment of the water, the different water treatment facilities we have. It's chlorination, it's the UV treatment, it's filtration. We have to do a lot of sampling, water quality sampling, primarily for Vancouver Coast Health on all the water systems. So every day, crews are driving up and down the coast to take samples of our different systems. We do a lot of monitoring at the facilities and remote through our sensors that we have installed through all the systems. And that's not only for the water quality, but also just in terms of flows and pressures in different parts of the system. We have to do a lot of environmental monitoring, especially on Chapman Creek, but also on some of the other water systems that could be impacted by our water withdrawals. There's a lot of cost associated with actually the distribution of the water. It's pumps, that need to be operated and maintained, hydro bills that have to be paid for those pumps. And there's a lot of costs going into that as well. Routine maintenance of all the infrastructure. We have about 400 kilometers of water main, and they all need to be maintained and service. All the pumps and valves, they need to be, and hydrants. Don't forget all the hydrants that we need to maintain. Materials and supplies. Every now and then, we have to do minor upgrades to our water treatment systems, which include replacement of instrumentation, a minor pump that fails. For example, we recently had our pump fail that provides the dosing pump for our chemicals was failing, so we have to buy a new one. Those are being funded out of user fees. Feasibility studies. So to confirm the feasibility of a project or to scope a project that we need to do, capital project, those are all funded out of user fees. We can only fund capital projects if it's actually resulting in a capital asset and actually something tangible. So when we do the scoping exercise, what is actually what we need, what is the issue, and how can we best address it? That's all being done out of funded out of user fees. Engineering design, some preliminary engineering design is usually included in that as well. One of the projects that we're currently undertaking is a review of our rate structure. Currently, all the users of a system are paying within the regional water system are paying the same fees, except for commercial and institutional. and we just started a review of that rate structure, and more on that is to be presented to the board in 2023. We do a lot of communication and engagement. We respond to a lot of public inquiries. We do long-term planning, more on that later. We're currently working on the water strategy development, and that's the long-term water plan that's currently being developed. We do a lot on leak detection and leak resolution on our own system, but also on private systems, on private connections to our system. We are updating several of our bylaws and policies, and we do a lot of water conservation outreach, especially also this year with our drought response and everything that I forgot to mention. And back over to Tina.
Thank you, Remco. So what does this equate to in dollars? So in 2022, our estimated amended budget was approximately $9 million. The capital expenses are budgeted for 26 million. And one of the things to keep in mind is that some of our projects, such as the Church Road Well or our water rating program, are multi-year projects. And so those do, it doesn't mean that if this particular budget is the same for 2023 that we've added that amount, is to say that we have these ongoing capital projects that we plan on doing. And there's several more that are going to be added for the 2023 budget. So looking like our budget next year will look quite similar and or might look a little higher than it has this year.
Tina, can you maybe allude a little bit what's included in the administrative side of the house?
Yes, thanks, Remco, for the prompt. So I think this is where you can see that a lot of our wages and benefits make up most of the operating costs for this particular service. And essentially, we do a lot of work within our organization, within the staffing we have. The administrative portion that's here, that's included at 15% is what's called our support service overhead. So that includes the staff to support collecting the bills, issuing the bills, but also our IT infrastructure, our reception centers, and all sort of the infrastructure that keeps the regional district afloat. And so that's a portion to the regional service just on an apportionment. So they don't pay for all of those costs, but a portion of. And essentially the operating costs, which make up about 24% of the service, those are things for the materials and supplies, training and development for staff, and things just to, tools and our vehicle overhead for our fleet. So that's really what makes up the service. So a lot of it is our manpower, woman power, people power associated with operating the service.
So we see several challenges in terms of our capital projects. One of them is the global supply shortage and demand question. It's not only causing delays in getting something, but it's also usually driving up the price. And we see that all over the place, that things are getting more expensive and harder to get. And there's an inflation rate calculated specifically for construction projects. While the average CPI might be lower for the specific one for construction is currently estimated for 2023 at 13%. And that's significant. And we see that ourselves as well in almost all our projects. It's hard to keep them within our approved budget a year ago. And our operating costs are continuing to increase as well. And one of the areas we see that in is, for example, the construction of a meter of water main. Last year costed, let's say, in the regional water system, $800 a meter, linear meter, and only because of an increase in construction costs, we're currently already projecting it would be over 900, and this is per meter. So if we're talking about several kilometers of water main, these are substantial increases that we have to tackle somehow. Another area is fittings, pipes and fittings. Just everything that's made out of metal bronze, metal, brass, all those kind of material costs are have gone up significantly, especially since the war in Ukraine started earlier this year. And climate change, it's continued to throw us all kind of curveballs. A year ago, we had two during the November atmospheric river event with two significant water main breaks, one in Red Roofs and one on Reed Road, and they actually resulted in boil water advisories for certain areas for several days, and we expect more of those to come in the upcoming years, just because of rain events. And I think we all know that drought is an ongoing challenge for us as a result of the climate change, and it forces us to develop more sources, do more conservation, but also, just as Tina alluded to, it has a financial implication to us as well.
So looking ahead as far as water rates, on December 9th, we just concluded our special committee where we presented all utility rates for the regional district for all our water and wastewater services. So essentially at the end of that, for the regional water system, our 2023 rates for users will go up approximately $124. Our parcel tax, we recognize that due to the increase in user charges, we reduced that proposed rate increase is about $86.72 with an overall impact of approximately $200 to each user. So that means the combined rate for 2023 will be just over $1,000 for users of the regional system. So that equates to about an approximate percentage increase of over 25%. So here we've also depicted some of the reserve balances that we're talking about earlier. And one of the things that we're trying to do, and the reason why the user rate is proposed, is for us to rebuild that balance of approximately 700,000 back to just under 50% of where it was at the start of 2022. So we're estimating that the end of that particular uncommitted reserve balance at the end of 2023, failing no emergencies or emergent needs, will be just about 1.8 million. Our capital reserves are going to be estimated at just under 5 million. And so we have been teetering around that area for several years. So we do rebuild the reserve account each year. However, what's happening is we're depleting the reserves a little faster than we are contributing to them. One of the things that we're working on is we are trying to develop our capital renewal plans for this particular service to understand what our capital replacement needs are. Our 2014 corporate asset management plan did peg the water infrastructure at well over $300 million of replacement values. And so those estimated costs are quite low. So it just gives you an idea of how little we actually have in reserves based on some of the projects that we need to fund. And so although $5 million sounds like a lot of money, based on the type of projects that we do, which are a couple of $1 million, that we have several on the books for 2023 proposed, it really doesn't take very long unless we have other sources of funding. And so that's one of the things that you'll see in the 2023 budget is we're starting to use a lot of having to go to debt funding, either short-term or long-term, for the regional water service, because the projects that we need, or the infrastructure renewals, or some of the things we need to do, we just don't have sufficient funds to sustainably deliver the service. And another thing to note is that we can't borrow for operational cost legislatively. That's not an option. So we have to make sure that our user rates pay for the service. So I'll transfer it back to you, Remco. Thank you. Actually, sorry, yes. One of the things that arose out of the discussions on December the 9th was, and through some of the utility fees that we have been experiencing over the last couple of years is whether or not people can make installments like they do for our property taxes with the regional district. And the answer is yes. Although you receive a bill one time, you can make installments on account. And once your bill is owing on that due date, then that amount would be allocated to your bill. So we can issue pre-authorized payments through your institution, and you can come to the regional district. You can do post-dated checks. For those people, there's a couple thousand people who receive their bills online and pay through that MySCRD, and so they can put amounts on account if that is a better financial planning tool for people to do that. Then that's something that if you contact the regional district, we can definitely help you set that up. Another thing to understand is that interest charges are applied to unpaid balances by the due dates. And if those amounts aren't done, then reminder statements are sent after the due date, and again, a couple months later. And if they're not paid by the end of the year, those particular balances are transferred to property taxes. Another thing that has been asked is the parcel taxes are put onto your property tax bill. So if you are in the district of Sechelt, the district of Sechelt pays or collects those on your behalf, and the surveyor of tax pays collects for the rural areas. And so that particular portion of that particular amount that we were talking about earlier can be deferred if you do take part in the tax deferment program. So that's another question that people wanted some clarification last week. So we wanted to ensure people had that information.
Thank you. So a question we got frequently asked is, our taxes are going up or have been going up over the last several years. Why are we not getting more water? Where's the water? And I think it's one of the primary reasons is it just takes several years for a water supply source to be constructed. And I will go through some of the projects that we're working on for next year and indicate where they are and what they will result in. Church of Wellfield, we started the project in 2018. We started the construction almost a year ago, the groundbreaking, and it will significantly improve our water supply situation during summer months, and it will be commissioned in January. So it will be definitely ready for the 2023 summer. But as you can see, it took almost 5 years to get a project from initial initiation to final completion. Another thing we're doing is we are reviewing some of our bylaws, in particular bylaw 320 and 422. Bylaw 320 is a very old bylaw that we have that is in dire need of modernization and upgrading because it's not meeting our current day standards anymore. And it is the bylaw that sets the technical standards and the process for a subdivision or for a developer to adhere to before we take over a water or wastewater system. So every new developer, every lot that is being subdeveloped on the coast or developed, and it needs a water connection, the developer has to fund any costs associated with the installation of a water service to those lots, and after an inspection by the SRD, we take it over in terms of the operation and ongoing maintenance of those systems. But the initial costs are all being paid for by the developer, and we also collect development cost charges from the developer. And that's all regulated through bylaw 320 and bylaw 422. That's our water rates and regulation bylaw, and that is outdated as well, and we're modernizing that as well with the focus. Actually, both are updated also with the focus on how can we make them stronger in terms of their water conservation focus. Another water supply expansion project that is underway is our Langdale well field. If you drive up to the BC Ferry terminal on the left side, you see some fences up next to the overflow parking. That's the location of the Langdale well field that's being developed. We already have a well there, and we're drilling. We've drilled 2 new wells that will be tested shortly on their productivity, and then a final decision will be made to actually start developing them. And so we're in early stage of development, and we hope to have that completed in 2025. Maybe it will be 2026. Let's hope it's not. But in combination with Church Road and Langdale combined, we anticipate that the water supply deficit for the Chapman system is significantly reduced. Another project that has been in the books for several years now is our large reservoir in the Chapman watershed to store water in the spring so that we can release it in the summer. There's a site called Site B, which is on the east side of Chapman Creek at same elevation of the mine. And that would also significantly increase our water supply. And we're currently doing there will be some further geotechnical work completed there this winter, and we hope to provide the results of that early next year to the board for the consideration on next steps. Grey Creek, along the inlet, it's also a water supply source that we're exploring, but we want to make sure that the flows in that creek are sufficient during dry summers to actually to make sure that it's actually worthwhile to further develop that creek as a water source. So we're currently doing monitoring of the creek flows until 2024 before we make a final decision on further investment of that water supply source. There are wells being tested as we speak on Eastbourne Island to increase the water supply there. Hope to have a development decision there next year as well. We're currently in the process of tendering or getting a contractor in place to install the water meters for the Seashell area. That will help us significantly in identifying and resolving leaks on private properties, and it allows for a rate review for the entire regional water system. So we hope to have the construction initiated there early 2023. There are some safety upgrades required to our dams at Chapman and Edwards Lake that are being constructed next year. We are in the process of improving our chlorination system at our Chapman Creek water treatment plant. It's because the system was pretty outdated, but the primary reason is also improve community safety. We were using a very old mechanism or pretty old system to chlorinate our water, and that poses some risk to the community, and that we feel it could be better served with the new system. So we're completing the construction of that early next year. And next year, we'll update our UV treatment as well on the same treatment plant. And that project will be completed early 2024. So as you can see, there's a lot on the go. And just to give you an indication of dollar amounts, UV treatment system, I think total cost $1.5 million. Chlorination system, total cost $2 million plus. Dam safety, $3 million. Water meters, $7 million. Eastbourne well, $1.2 million. Grey Creek to be determined. Water reservoir to be determined. Langdale well, $5-6 million. And Church Road is $9 million. So this is just an indication of where the 26 is coming from, where our CFO was already talking about in terms of the capital projects that are on the books for next year. Let's see if this works. So what are we working on in terms of developing our future water supply is, as I indicated earlier, we're developing a long-term plan for everything related to water, which is called a water strategy. It defines what our objectives are and strategies are related to water supply, water conservation, source protection, as well as our infrastructure. How can we maintain our infrastructure in a proper manner? And the water strategy will be presented to the community and the board early next year. Has been public consultation completed earlier this year. And out of that water strategy, there will be action plans for each system that will really outline what are the actions that will need to take place for each of these systems in the upcoming 5 to 10 years, and what are the financial implications of that. And having those plans in place will support the setting of rates for the upcoming years for long-term financial planning as well. Part of that is our ongoing need for our aging infrastructure. Keep an eye on that to replace it as needed and ensure that it doesn't fail. Indicated that we're doing a lot of feasibility studies and construction of additional water supply sources. Climate change is continuing to throw some curveballs. One of them, I haven't touched about it yet, is our Eastbourne water system. It's a very small system, and it's also surface water fed from Wall Lake. And Wall Lake is experiencing higher organic levels than have been noticed in the past, and most likely that's a result of climate change. And we are having issues with getting that higher organic, more brown water to treat that properly. So a feasibility study is proposed for next year to see what we can do there in terms of what is required there to upgrade the treatment. Asset management plans that are really the plans to that are outlining what we need to do with our current infrastructure. What are the total replacement costs for all our infrastructure? And as Tina was referring to, in 2014, there was estimated to be 300 million, but we know that it is way higher in this current era after 8 years. So we're finalizing those plans, and they will be presented to the board and to the community next year. And as discussed earlier, we are reviewing our rate structure. And that's it. And there are questions, so I'll stop sharing my screen.
Thanks, Remco. Appreciate that. So for those who may have joined just in the midst of the presentation there, you can ask questions just by using the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen, or else you can also raise your hand and we can bring you into the meeting to ask the question yourself. And Remco, I think some of the questions that you may have answered, and Tina as well, through the presentation, but I'll just ask them here. So Larry Hamlin, thanks for joining us, Larry. I see you got a couple of questions in there that we'll get to. I know, Remco, you said early next year, I believe, for water meters, and just want to make sure we cover that off. So Larry's asking, when will water meters be installed? Lives in Porpoise Bay and does not want to pay for other people's water usage.
So the tender documents have been finalized. So we will post them just before Christmas or early next year, and then it will depend on how many contractors will be interested to do the job, and then what the timelines are that they can actually start installing them. So it's really it's a high priority for us to get those documents out for tender and to get a contractor in that can start doing the work. The entire project, the entire installation project, we estimate it to be about a year and a half to get all the 4,500 water meters installed. So it will totally depend on the planning of the contractor when Porpoise Bay is in their schedule. But it's a high priority for us to get the meters installed.
Great. So thank you. Andre, I see you have your hand up. I'll get to you in a second. I'm just going to go to Chris F here real quick. So Chris is speaking to one of the graphs, I believe, that we had in the presentation itself. And he's saying 75% is going towards wages and benefits and 25% towards water delivery. He says seemed a little backwards.
Maybe I can take a first crack at it. A good example of that is we have to do our water system, as indicated, are all over the coast from Egmont to Langdale. So our staff is spending a lot of time driving up and down the coast. In the morning when I drive to the office, I usually pass 3 or 4 cars that are driving up. And what they're going to do, they're going to do water sampling. They're going to do maintenance operation of the South Bend treatment plant, or they're going to maintain valves in one of the northern areas or one of the southern water systems. So maintaining a valve doesn't require a lot of actual cost, but it's a lot of just staff time taking out or a hydrant, taking apart a hydrant, putting it back together, testing it, and going to the next one. So there's not a lot of operational cost involved there, but it's just a lot of time to do it. And that's the same with when we operate our treatment plants. Yes, there are chemicals involved, chlorine and other some materials, but a lot of time it's just make sure that the plant works and fixing issues. And a lot of the staff time is also, as I just indicated, on feasibility studies and long-range planning. So all of those kind of staff that are involved in that work, it's just staff time.
Perfect. Thank you, Remco. Andrea, I'm just going to bring you into the meeting here. So feel free to unmute there and ask your question.
Okay. So I live in Half Moon Bay, and right now the only place we're getting water from is Chapman Lake. Is that correct?
Primarily, yeah. Chapman Lake and Edwards Lake.
Okay, and so Church Road well won't be ready till 23. The Langdale well won't be ready till 25, 26. And the Site B reservoir won't be ready till...
There has no decision being made that it will actually be constructed. Okay. So,
right. So, this is all a little bit down the road. Our water coming in, and it just seems to me that we don't have a water shortage in this rainforest we live in. We have a lot of rain that falls. We seem to have a water storage problem. Has a reservoir been considered that could be built maybe sooner than waiting for these wells to be drilled or finished or in or whatever?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So to clarify, the Church Road well field will be completed. We hope to have it finished this January, so in a month and a half from now. So that project will be completed, and there will you'll benefit from that as well, even though the water from that well might not reach your own house, but it means that a lot of water that's currently being fed from our Chapman water treatment plant above Soma Park is fed through Roberts Creek to, for example, the Elphinstone, to feed Elphinstone and Roberts Creek. That entire area will be fed by Church Road water, so that all the Chapman water can go towards Seychelles and more towards Half Moon Bay. So it will have an immediate impact next year summer on your own water supply situation. The reservoir, we currently have 11 reservoirs along the coast, and they are small reservoirs. Those reservoirs are really intended to make sure that there is enough pressure in your own house on a 24-hour basis. So we have about 11 of those reservoirs, and depending on where you live in Half Moon Bay, your reservoir will be in the Welcome Woods area or will be Trout Lake. We have 2 reservoirs there. Trout Lake is feeding the northern part of Half Moon Bay, and the woods area is fed by Welcome Woods. So the Site B reservoir that I was talking about, that will be a significant, a huge reservoir that could provide the entire coast with 30 days of water supply. And but early cost estimate that were completed 2 years ago were estimated it could easily cost $20 million to complete. So that's why further work is currently being undertaken to make sure that it is actually feasible, and to further refine that cost estimate before a decision is being made to actually spend that amount of money.
Okay, thank you. Just one more quick question. Sounds like we're going to have more water next year, but there's no halt in the number of new construction buildings and homes. Does it make any sense to put a moratorium on any building until this water problem is solved? So that we can water our gardens, so that we can raise some of our own food, considering the cost of food is going up all the time?
Thank you for that question. Every house that's being built on the coast, of course, is increases the water supply to increase the water demand. There's no doubt, there's no question there. However, at the same time, there are still a significant amount of properties on the coast that have leaking connections. And all those connections are on private sites, so they're on private properties. And over the last several months, we identified some huge leaks, and we've been able to resolve them. And some of those leaks were leaking. The leak itself was 70,000 liters, and another was 40,000, another was 40,000, 30,000. So a day. So that combined, it equals over 500 houses in terms of their water use. So our focus on leak resolution is, I think, more important, or is a high priority for us, because solving leaks is I think one of the best water conservation measures we can do. And if we solve one of those leaks, or several of those large leaks, it addresses it compensates for the entire growth on the entire Sunshine Coast.
Yeah, thanks, Remco. Thank you.
Thank you,
Andrea. Mike, I'll get to your question in a second. I'm just going to move back into the Q&A here for a moment. We got a question here from Kim. Kim, thanks for joining us this evening. Kim saying, given the huge financial requirements for our water supply, what other funding sources are being pursued? Given the large seasonal demand we experience, can we implement a hotel vacation tax similar to Whistler and Tofino? Tina?
So I can start with our other sources of funding. So for this year, we're actually in 2022. Yeah, we're still in 2022. We have applied for some infrastructure grants for the regional system. We applied for what's called the Strategic Priorities Fund for our water metering program. So that particular grant actually is quite unique in the sense where we can expend funds in the time from the time we submitted an application. So it doesn't hinder us from proceeding with that particular project. The cap on that particular grant was $6 million, and I believe the budget for that particular project is 7.5, so it wouldn't quite cover the cost. But if some of you recall, that particular project is supposed to be funded through long-term debt funding. So we're always looking at opportunities, and I think one of the items that Remco has mentioned either at the earlier presentation or now is that in order for us to be successful with our grant applications, our projects have to be shovel ready. So that means that's why we're doing a lot of these feasibility studies, so we can be prepared and have our best foot forward when we want to apply for these particular grants. So that's why it's really important that we do those types of things, so we can put a really good, strong application forward to both the province and our federal funding programs. Also, the competitivity of those particular grant streams are quite significant. For for instance, the grant stream we just applied to only has $100 million allocation. And so there was well over 400 applications to that stream. And of course, our particular bid was a $6 million application. So it doesn't take long to understand that it's very competitive, and there's not a lot of money based on the needs throughout the province and Canada for those particular grant streams. We're also looking this year to start to use a lot of debt funding for some of our projects. So that's where some of the things we have identified is that our significant depletion of reserves has required us to look at alternative sources when we are trying to fund some of those larger capital projects, like the chlorination project and various smaller capital projects. So as far as other sources of funding, as far as the property tax goes, some of those would be provincially mandated or something. And as a regional district, we do have different legislation associated with the types of taxes that we can collect. We aren't a municipality, and so those would be things that we'd probably have to get special orders in council, and are something definitely that the community or our local elected officials can advocate for through channels such as ABICC and UBCM. But to my recollection, I haven't heard of that. I know that there has been discussion about speculation taxes here on the Sunshine Coast, but specific to pay for user fees or to some of the infrastructure here. The only means that we have right now are through development cost charges, so what's called DCCs. And again, those are contributed for very specific purposes for our infrastructure requirements for the regional system.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Tina. Thanks for the question, Kim. Mike, I'm just going to bring you into the meeting here. Thanks for holding on there. So if you want to unmute, you can go ahead. You can ask your question. I see you've unmuted there.
Okay, thank you very much.
No worries.
I've just got a comment, or several comments to make. During the past 5 months, I've not been able to water my garden, so I've had thousands of dollars of expensive plants ruined through the lack of water. My car paint is suffering through the lack of water because I cannot wash my car, and yet you're allowed to fill community swimming pools, the skating rinks are watered and maintained with water. And then you said that, or the infrastructure manager said that there's no alignment between payments and immediate water supply. So if that's the case, then why are we paying for water? Shouldn't it be free? I'll just pass a comment there that if I went to a store and bought £10 of apples, I'd expect £10. So if I pay over $1,000 a year for water, I expect $1,000 worth, not 7 months worth, 12 months worth. Why am I not getting it? If that's the case, and I'm not getting that, then where is that money going to? We're in a ridiculous situation here where all I hear or all I see from your answer are smoke and mirrors. You just don't want to face the truth. We're in dire straits here, and yet you're just tossing balls up and down in the air. Give the people some answers. And one other thing that I found ridiculous: this meeting is not open to the general public. I'm a pensioner. I'm quite fortunate that I'm computer literate. There are an awful lot of people out there that are not computer literate, and you expect them to go on a Zoom meeting? Why was it open to the general public in your offices? There you go. There are my comments and questions.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Maybe I can maybe take the one about the meeting itself. Mike, thanks for your point about maybe making this putting it in person as well. We made a decision to host it online. It was the most expedient manner in trying to get people together. But point taken on that one. Thank you for that. I'm not too sure if there's anything else that Mike referred to that Tina or Remco would like to answer to. If not, well then I can jump right back into our Q&A.
Maybe I can. I'm triggered by your comparison about apples because I like apples, but I think the feat that we're currently trying to undertake at the SRD in terms of water, we're trying to maintain our current house and build a new one. And everybody that wants build a new house, and I see the new houses as expanding our water supply, means that you have to pay a lot up front before you can actually start living in that house. And I think that's what's currently happening. And so I completely understand why you're saying that we're currently paying a lot, and where is it? And my answer to that is we're building the house, and the investments are being made, and they are paying off because we're getting Church Road online next month, hopefully. But it is definitely, I can understand why you feel the disconnect between I pay for something but I don't get it, because we're building it. We're not in that new house yet. We're still developing that new house while maintaining and upgrading our existing.
Perfect. Thank you, Remco. We got a couple of questions in the Q&A that I'm just going to go through here. An anonymous attendee is asking about the water meters. He's asking whether or not there's any opportunity to provide financial incentives for a contractor to get the meters installed faster.
That's currently definitely under consideration.
And the next question is a bit more, I guess, of a process question. It's Chris F. asking whether or not the increase in water rates has been approved. I don't know, Tina, if you can maybe expand a little bit more on what the next steps are. And I know they go forward to a meeting later this week.
Yeah, so basically from a timing perspective, due to the municipal election, some of our pre-budget discussions occurred just in early December, which typically happen end of October or early November. And sometimes those particular discussions inform where we are heading, give or take, as far as rates go. Our water rates and all our utility fee are our annual rates. And so those particular bylaws need to be approved prior to year end. So the reports were presented on December 9th and are going forward to a special board meeting on December 15th for approval.
Perfect. Thank you, Tina. Brian is asking, why is Marianne West Well not in the future water supply list? I'll go for that one your way.
Thank you. Because my slide had only that much space. So yes, there's a lot more on the go, and Marianne West is definitely still after one of the areas that we're confirming the feasibility for. What we have to confirm there is that if we were to develop something on Marianne West, in Marianne West Well Park, that we can do it in a sustainable manner and not impacting the town of Gibson's water supply, which is the same aquifer. So that will be that work will start shortly as well.
Okay, perfect. Gary's asking, restrictions start in April or May. We're still under stage 1 water conservation regulations right now, but if memory serves me correct, it's usually May, right, Remco, or April?
Yeah, usually we go to stage 1 on May 1st and go to stage 2 when Chapman Lake Dam starts overflowing. And usually that's June or July.
Bruce is asking, is the STRD increasing the cost of new home hookups in the subdivisions that are being serviced by the STRD's water system? So I presume that's Chapman, but could probably extend into other water systems as well.
Indicated that we're reviewing 2 of our bylaws, and one of them sets the conditions for new connections, and the other one sets the rates for that. So that's definitely part of our review for next year that we're currently are undertaking.
Perfect, thank you. Larry, I've seen your questions. I'll come back to them in a second. I just want to get to some folks who may not have already asked a question yet. It's a comment, but I don't know, it kind of ends okay. It says the SRD has failed us miserably in the past. It seems the problem's finally being addressed. We got Ellie. Ellie's asking when the church, I presume Church Road well, comes into play in January, will we still have stages to go through, or will we have unlimited water use?
Unfortunately, Church Road is not that productive, so I cannot say that we have unlimited water use yet. Langdale will make a difference there as well in the future. but it will definitely reduce the risk that we have to go to stage 4 for next year. But it totally, as this fall showed us, the weather can surprise us again next year. So I'm not going to make any commitments anymore on something that is weather related.
Okay. I'm just going to go up to a couple of Larry's questions here. Larry says it's an unacceptable percentage increase with what's going on in our economy. I'm doing a deferral on my taxes this year. I want to know if the proposed water rate percentage increase can be deferred as well. Send that one to you, Tina.
So user rates are not something that could be deferred immediately. One of the things that was asked, and we'd have to follow up with the surveyor of taxes, is if someone chooses not to pay their water bill and it gets transferred to tax in 2024 for the 2023 bill, we're not encouraging people to do that because that has some implications from the ability and cash flow of the water rate. So if everybody did that, we'd actually not have funds to potentially deliver the service. So those would potentially be eligible for deferral of taxes for the future rate. But again, you'd probably be paying a substantially higher rate than what was on your bill, just because that particular amount would have incurred some penalties and interest charges associated with that. So user fees are typically not part of a tax deferral program until it goes to an actual tax.
Perfect. Thanks, Tina. Larry, again, and we'll just go for a couple more minutes here. Now we're going slightly over. So thanks to everybody for sticking with us. We've had a lot of good questions. So has the water rate structure been determined? This is to you, Remco, I reckon. Has the water rate structure been determined, or do we have to wait until late 2024? I understood that the meters will be installed in 2023. When I lived in South Surrey and the city installed meters, our annual cost for water went down by 50%. And I even had a hot tub that was changed 4 times a year.
Thank you for the question. So the new water rate structure has not been determined yet. We are earlier in the process to review our current one, review our options. We will need to have further discussion about a new rate structure with the board, with the community. That work will be undertaken in 2023, and then the new rates itself will need to be established. And we need to have all the water meters installed before we can actually implement it. So I think the earliest we can expect, you can expect that a new rate structure will be in place, will be early 2025, not earlier.
Perfect. Thank you, Remco. And we got one last question, and I think this person may have missed part of your presentation, the portions of your presentation, Remco. So I'm hoping that that you might be able to give a little summary of what we're doing to increase supply right now in the Chapman system. And I'll also let the person know you can go on to our Let's Talk engagement page, letstalk.scrd.ca/water. And there's a full list there. But I know, Remco, if you want to maybe give us a quick answer with a couple of the projects that are ongoing.
Okay, I will try to keep it short. Eastbourne well. On Eastbourne, we're drilling wells and we're expanding the water supply for the Eastbourne water system. We are developing the new wells at Langdale. If you drive up to the ferry, you look to the left, next to the overflow parking lot, you see fences. That's where and trucks. That's where the new wells are currently being developed and tested. Marianne West, as discussed earlier, more monitoring will be required there to confirm that we're not impacting Town of Kitchen's water supply before we start developing anything there. Creek is a creek along the inlet, on the east side of the inlet, that we currently have a water supply that we can use there for summer months, for a few months of the year. And we might want to expand that, but we want to have the assurance that there is actually enough flow in the creek during dry summers for us to divert. So that it's actually worthwhile building a treatment plant there at a cost of $4 to $5 million. So before we do that investment, we want to make sure that it's actually effective. And as those are projects that are currently underway to address the immediate water supply situation and for the next 5 to 10 years. And as Tina alluded, there are studies being undertaken or initiated shortly to further explore where else can we drill new wells and what other kind of surface water sources are there out there that we could develop to meet the demand of the community in 10, 15, 20 years from now.
And I said that was the last question, but there's one other really good question that's come in, Remco,
Yeah,
and I hope
sorry.
you might be able to answer it because it gives us an opportunity to plug our monthly water use update. But it's a good question. So it's Ross. Thanks for this. Ross is asking, says, we recently started our subscription to the SCRD daily water usage average for our house. Very helpful and informative. We're at 50% of the average. My question is, why can't we decide the use of the water between inside and outside use? If the water is monitored, then shouldn't we be best judges between having a bath or growing tomatoes? And while you answer that, Remco, I'll just put in the chat the link through for people to sign up for their water usage updates.
Thank you. It's really difficult for the SRD to regulate water use inside the house because there's no way for us to enforce it. And without the water meters in place in all the systems, there's no way for us to, let's say, set a maximum amount of water somebody can use in a household, because then you can really say, I don't care how you use it, as long as it's not more than that. So part of the review of our waterway structure will also include how can we incentivize people to use to make more water, to provide them more freedom to use the water as they feel fit, as long as it's the total amount they're using is reasonable. So that is on the books, but again, it can only be implemented once all the water meters are installed in the seashore area as well, and we can do that for all our systems. And currently, this program to sign up for a monthly water use update is the link Aiden just put in the chat. Is only available for those in the community that have a water meter installed, which is primarily in the rural system. So if you have a water meter installed, send us an email, sign up, and you'll get monthly emails with your water updates, water use compared to last year, the months prior, as well as average. And it's very beneficial.
Perfect. Thank you, Remco. You saved me from typing that into the chat. I appreciate that. So with that, we're going to wrap up. I don't know, Tina, Remco, whether or not you had any closing remarks or anything on those lines that you'd like to add in. I'll maybe send it over to you guys before we finish up the session altogether. Remco?
No, I want to thank everybody for attending, and if there are further questions, feel free to post them on Let's Talk, and we'll make sure that we get back to you.
Yes, and we're going to be having our round one budget deliberations at the end of January, and we're going to be having some more public information sessions as part of the budget, and so some of this information will be communicated there as well.
Thanks, Tina. Yeah, so any of the sessions that we're doing are being communicated quite broadly through Facebook, and we're also utilizing the Coast Reporter, both online and the paper itself. And we also send out news releases too. But if you stay tuned to the engagement page that I just put into the chat, it's a really good source of information and updates. So with that, we'll close this evening. Thanks, Tina. Thanks, Remco, for your time, and thank you everybody for attending.